The silence of deep space was broken only by the gentle hum of the research vessel's engines as it drifted through the asteroid field near the outer rim. Dr. Thorne adjusted his scanner for the third time that morning, searching for mineral deposits that might justify their extended mission in this dangerous sector. The Galactic Coalition had sent them here to study the unusual gravitational anomalies, but so far they had found nothing but empty rock and cosmic dust. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, announced Communications Officer Raven from her station. Her elongated Centaurian fingers danced across the holographic display as she refined the sensor readings. It's large, metallic, and drifting without power. Thorne moved to the main viewer, his four eyes focusing on the object that slowly resolved from the stellar background. What he saw made his breathing apparatus flutter with excitement. The vessel was clearly artificial, roughly 800 meters in length, with an angular design unlike anything in the Coalition database. Hull breaches scarred its surface, and entire sections appeared to have been blown away by weapons fire. Unknown configuration, reported Chief Analyst Vale from the science station. Her tentacles worked across multiple interfaces simultaneously as she gathered data. The materials appear to be simple metal alloys, mostly iron and carbon composites. No exotic matter signatures detected. The ship's design was brutally functional, all sharp angles and heavy plating. Where Coalition vessels featured graceful curves that allowed energy to flow around their hulls, this craft seemed built to absorb and endure punishment. Massive turrets projected from its surface like the spines of some primitive beast, their barrels dark and cold. I'm detecting residual radiation patterns consistent with recent combat, Vale continued. The damage appears fresh, perhaps days old at most. Hull temperature suggests the reactor has been offline for approximately 72 hours. Thorne felt his excitement building. First contact with humanity had occurred only months ago, and their technology remained largely mysterious. The humans had been polite but secretive during initial negotiations, sharing little about their military capabilities. This could be the breakthrough the Coalition's Xenotechnology division had been hoping for. Any life signs? He asked, though. He suspected he already knew the answer. The ship's dark windows and venting atmosphere told their own story. Negative on biological activity, Raven confirmed. However, I am detecting some low-level electronic emissions. Basic automated systems appear to be running on emergency power. Dr. Hayes, their materials specialist, enhanced the image on the main screen. The vessel's construction became clearer as the sensors penetrated its outer layers. The hull was incredibly thick, far heavier than necessary by Coalition standards, and appeared to be composed of multiple layers of different materials. Look at this armor configuration, Hayes muttered, his voice filled with professional curiosity. They've layered different materials with varying density and composition. It's primitive but ingenious. Each layer would interact differently with different types of weapons. The ship's weapon systems were equally fascinating. Instead of the elegant energy projectors favored by most civilizations, the humans had mounted massive kinetic cannons that appeared designed to hurl solid projectiles at tremendous velocities. Missile tubes clustered around the vessel's midsection like the egg sacs of some dangerous insect. Captain, Vale said, using Thorne's honorary title, I'm reading extensive damage to the forward sections, but the aft compartments appear intact. If we could board through the cargo bay, we might be able to access their computer systems. Thorne considered the risks. They were deep in contested space, far from Coalition patrol routes. If this was some kind of trap, help would be days away. But the scientific value of intact human military technology was immeasurable. The Coalition strategists were desperate to understand human capabilities, especially after the disturbing reports coming from border conflicts. The vessel appears to be genuinely derelict, he decided. Prepare a boarding party. Full environmental suits and portable power units. I want everything documented. As the away team suited up, Thorne studied the human ship more carefully. Something about its design philosophy bothered him, though he couldn't identify exactly what. Coalition warships were built for specific roles: fast attack, heavy bombardment, fleet support. This vessel seemed designed for something else entirely. Something he didn't have words for. The airlock cycled, and the boarding party launched toward the damaged vessel. Their suits' thrusters carried them across the void to what appeared to be a cargo bay with its doors blown away by internal explosions. Emergency lighting flickered weakly in the darkness beyond. "Atmospheric pressure is minimal but stable," reported Commander Nova as they entered the ship. "Gravity plates are still functioning on emergency power. Temperature is just above freezing." The cargo bay was a scene of controlled chaos. Equipment was secured with multiple redundant restraining systems, as if the builders expected their ship to be thrown around violently. Blast doors were reinforced with additional plating, and emergency patches covered what looked like weapons impacts on the interior bulkheads. "The construction is incredibly robust," Hayes observed as he scanned the walls. "These aren't just blast doors, they're designed to contain explosions and maintain pressure even when severely damaged. It's like they expected to fight from inside." A damaged ship? The corridors beyond were narrow by Coalition standards, clearly designed for beings of human size and proportions. But what struck the team most was the sheer redundancy of everything. Power conduits ran in parallel tracks, with backup systems for the backup systems. Life support had multiple independent networks, each capable of maintaining basic functions for the entire ship. "Look at this," Raven called from the side passage. She had found what appeared to be an armory, its contents scattered by the battle that had killed the ship. Human weapons lay among the debris, crude kinetic projectile throwers, alongside more sophisticated energy weapons, clearly adapted from Coalition designs, but it was the personal equipment that gave them pause. The humans had carried tools for welding, cutting, and repairing their ship during combat. Medical supplies were designed for trauma treatment under battlefield conditions. Everything spoke of a species that expected to keep fighting long after. Any reasonable being would have surrendered. As they worked deeper into the vessel, documenting and analyzing everything they found, none of the Coalition researchers suspected that the ship's automated systems were quietly observing their every move. In the depths of the vessel, minimal power still flowed to critical sensors, and ancient protocols were slowly awakening to assess these new visitors. The humans had indeed built their warship to keep fighting long after conventional defeat, but they had also built it to keep learning, keep watching, and keep preparing for the next battle. The Coalition team was about to discover that analyzing human military technology was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Metal groaned under their feet as the boarding party moved deeper into the human vessel. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere that made even veteran Coalition researchers uncomfortable. What they had, initially dismissed as primitive construction, was revealing layers of complexity that challenged their understanding of starship design. "Commander," Nova ran her scanner along a section of corridor wall that showed obvious battle damage. The metal was scarred and pitted, but what caught her attention were the repairs. Someone had welded crude patches over the worst holes, then reinforced those patches with additional plating salvaged from other parts of the ship. "These repairs were made during combat," she announced to the team. "Look at the welding patterns. They're rough, hurried, but effective." The crew was fixing their ship while under fire. Dr. Hayes studied the patches more closely. The metal composition didn't match the original hull plating. Instead, the humans had used whatever they could find: pieces of deck plating, equipment housings, even what appeared to be furniture components. The welds were crude but functional, creating a patchwork of different materials that somehow held together. "The engineering philosophy is completely different from ours," Hayes observed. "We design ships to avoid damage through shields and maneuverability. They seem to have designed theirs to absorb damage and keep functioning." Raven had moved ahead to what appeared to be a damage control station. The console was dark, but her portable power unit brought the displays to life. What she saw made her pause in confusion. The ship's status board showed cascade failures throughout multiple systems. but also showed dozens of jury-rigged connections that had maintained basic functions. The crew rerouted power through the food preparation systems to keep their weapons online, she reported with disbelief. They were cooking their meals with backup power while their main guns drew energy from the galley circuits. The team entered what had clearly been the ship's engineering section. The fusion reactors were indeed primitive by coalition standards, but they were built with an obsessive attention to redundancy that bordered on paranoia. Every critical component had not just a backup, but multiple backup systems. Using entirely different technologies. Vale examined the reactor control systems and found something that chilled her to her core. The humans had installed manual overrides. That would allow the crew to detonate their own power source. It wasn't a safety measure, the controls were labeled as a weapon system. The ship could be turned into a massive bomb at the flip of a switch. They weaponized their own reactor, she whispered. Not just as a last resort but as a tactical option. The blast calculations suggest they could take out anything within a kilometer radius. Nova discovered the ship's medical bay and found evidence that horrified her. The equipment was designed for battlefield surgery, with restraints built into every bed and tools meant for operating while the ship was under fire. Blood stains on the floors and walls told a story of desperate attempts to save wounded crew members during the heat of battle. The medical protocols are insane, Nova reported. They have procedures for amputating limbs to save power for life support, guides for performing surgery during combat maneuvers, and instructions for keeping wounded crew members conscious and functional even with severe injuries. But it was Hayes who made the most disturbing discovery in the weapon systems. The ship's armory contained thousands of kinetic projectiles, each one designed to punch through energy shields through pure momentum. The ammunition was depleted uranium, dense enough to maintain velocity through most defensive systems. These aren't precision weapons, Hayes realized. They're designed for raw destruction. Each projectile carries enough kinetic energy to punch through a coalition cruiser's hull and keep going. They don't disable enemy ships, they destroy them completely. The missile systems revealed even more unsettling details. The warheads were designed not just to explode, but to fragment into thousands of smaller projectiles that would continue causing damage long after the initial impact. Some missiles appeared to be designed specifically for ramming attacks, with reinforced nose cones and proximity fuses that would detonate only after penetrating deep into a target. Raven accessed the ship's tactical database and found weapon configurations that made no sense from a coalition perspective. The humans had guns designed to fire while the ship was spinning out of control, missiles that could be launched from damaged tubes, and even close-range weapons clearly meant for use when enemy ships were alongside for boarding actions. They planned for hand-to-hand combat aboard their own vessels, she reported with growing unease. The corridors have built-in defensive positions, blast doors that can be sealed from either side, and weapon caches hidden throughout the ship. They expect to fight room by room if necessary. The team gathered in what had been the ship's bridge to compare their findings. The command center was smaller than coalition standards, built for efficiency rather than comfort. But every station had manual backups, and every critical system could be controlled from multiple locations throughout the ship. Vale studied the captain's chair and found something that summed up everything they had learned about human military philosophy. Built into the armrest was a series of switches labeled with terms like scuttle, ramming speed, and last stand protocol. The humans had given their commanders the ability to turn their own ship into a weapon. The psychological profiles in the personnel files are unlike anything in our database, Raven reported as she accessed the crew records. These humans scored high on measures we associate with mental instability in other species. Willingness to continue fighting despite hopeless odds, ability to function under extreme stress, and something they called death before dishonor. Hayes was examining the environmental systems and making equally disturbing discoveries. The life support was designed to maintain basic survival conditions even with massive system failures. The humans could live and fight in environments that would incapacitate most other species within minutes. The air recycling systems can function at 15% capacity and still keep the crew conscious, he reported. The water recovery systems can recycle waste with 98% efficiency. They can survive for months on minimal resources. Nova found the ship's damage control protocols and realized the full scope of human military thinking. The crew had been trained to seal themselves into damaged compartments to prevent atmospheric loss, essentially sacrificing themselves to save the rest of the ship. Multiple log entries showed crew members volunteering for these suicide assignments. "They don't just fight until they die," she said quietly. "They fight by dying. Their tactics actually depend on crew members giving up their lives to maintain ship functions." As the team prepared to move deeper into the vessel, they began to understand that they weren't just analyzing alien technology, they were studying an entirely different philosophy of warfare. The humans didn't build ships to win battles quickly and efficiently. They built them to win wars through sheer determination and willingness to sacrifice everything. The Coalition researchers were beginning to suspect that first contact with humanity might have been the most dangerous thing that had ever happened to their civilization. Deep in the ship's data core, Raven worked to extract the vessel's final battle recordings. The human computer systems were primitive but incredibly robust, designed to preserve critical information even through catastrophic damage. As the translation algorithms processed the data, a picture emerged that challenged everything the Coalition thought they knew about acceptable warfare. The ship's name was Iron Will, commanded by someone called Captain Reed. The final entries showed the vessel as part of a human defense fleet protecting a mining colony from raiders. The tactical situation had been hopeless from the beginning. 15 human ships against over 40 enemy vessels with superior technology and firepower. The humans knew they couldn't win, Raven reported as she processed the battle logs. But they engaged anyway. Listen to this transmission from their fleet commander. "All ships, we're not here to survive today. We're here to make them pay such a price that they never come back." Vale studied the tactical displays that showed the battle's progression. What she saw violated every principle of space combat taught in Coalition military academies. The human ships had deliberately positioned themselves to absorb maximum enemy fire, using their own destruction to mask the movements of other vessels. "They used their own ships as decoys," Vale said with horror. 3 vessels deliberately drew fire from the entire enemy fleet while the rest of the human forces repositioned. Those 3 ships had no chance of survival, and their crews knew it. The battle recordings revealed human tactical thinking that made no sense to Coalition minds. When conventional weapons failed, human ships had rammed enemy vessels at full speed. When their hulls were breached, crews had continued fighting in vacuum suits. When their reactors were damaged, they had detonated them to take nearby enemies with them. Hayes accessed the engineering logs and found evidence of creativity born from desperation. When the Iron Will's main guns were destroyed, the crew had rigged construction equipment to fire projectiles through the breach in their hull. When the missile systems failed, they had manually armed warheads and used shuttlecraft to deliver them in suicide runs. "The crew turned their own shuttle bay into a weapons system," Hayes reported. "They loaded maintenance craft with explosives and flew them directly into enemy ships. The pilots volunteered for these missions knowing they wouldn't return." Nova discovered the medical records from the battle and found documentation that chilled her to her core. The ship's doctor had continued performing surgery while the vessel was spinning out of control from battle damage. Crew members had been treated for injuries, then immediately returned to their posts to continue fighting. "The casualty reports show 70% losses among the crew," Nova announced. But the survivors kept fighting. They had protocols for operating every ship system with minimal personnel. A single person could run the entire vessel if necessary. The psychological profiles in the database revealed the most disturbing aspect of human military culture. The crew had been trained not just to accept death in battle, but to embrace it as a tool for victory. They had something called acceptable loss ratios that treated their own lives as expendable resources in pursuit of strategic objectives. Raven found communication logs between human ships during the battle that revealed their true tactical doctrine. The fleet commander had been coordinating not just ship movements, but the timing of individual vessel destructions to maximize damage to the enemy. Each human death had been calculated to serve a larger purpose. They don't fight to win battles, Raven realized. They fight to win wars. Every engagement is part of a larger strategy. They were gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities while they died. The ship's sensor logs showed that the Iron Will had been recording everything throughout the battle: enemy weapon signatures, defensive capabilities, tactical responses. Even as the vessel was being destroyed, its computers were analyzing and transmitting this data to other human forces. Vale discovered that the human concept of victory was completely different from coalition understanding. Where other species fought until achieving specific objectives, humans apparently fought until their enemies were no longer capable of posing a threat. Their strategic planning assumed conflicts would continue for years or even decades. The long-term tactical database contained scenarios for 100-year wars, Vale reported with disbelief. They have contingency plans for fighting entire civilizations across multiple generations. They plan for their grandchildren to finish battles they start today. Hayes found the most disturbing evidence in the ship's constructors. The Iron Will hadn't been built just as a warship. It had been designed as a data collection platform. Every battle system was connected to analysis computers that studied enemy responses and transmitted that information to human military command. They're not just fighting us, Hayes realized. They're studying us. Every engagement teaches them how to fight us better. Their losses are investments in future victories. The ship's cultural database revealed why humans approached warfare so differently from other species. Their history was filled with conflicts that had lasted generations, wars where entire civilizations had been destroyed or transformed. They understood warfare not as a political tool, but as an existential struggle. Nova accessed the crew personal files and found evidence of something called total war doctrine. Human military training conditioned soldiers to view conflicts not as limited engagements with specific goals, but as struggles for the survival of their entire species. They fought as if every battle might be their last chance to protect their families and homes. The psychological conditioning is unlike anything in our database, Nova reported. They've trained themselves to override basic survival instincts. They can continue fighting in situations that would trigger surrender responses in any other species. The battle recordings showed human crews making decisions that defied rational analysis. When faced with certain death, they had chosen to die in ways that would cause maximum damage to their enemies. When capture seemed inevitable, they had destroyed their own ships rather than allow them to be taken. Raven discovered that human military doctrine included something called scorched earth tactics. If they couldn't hold territory, they would destroy it to deny it to their enemies. If they couldn't win a battle, they would make victory so costly that their enemies would think twice about future conflicts. They're willing to destroy everything rather than accept defeat, Raven said quietly. Their strategic planning includes scenarios for rendering entire star systems uninhabitable if they can't defend them. As the team processed their findings, they began to understand that humanity represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had turned warfare itself into their primary technology. They didn't just build better weapons or devise clever tactics. They had evolved a culture that treated conflict as a natural state, and peace as merely preparation for the next war. The coalition researchers were beginning to realize that they hadn't discovered just another military vessel. They had found evidence of a civilization that might be fundamentally incompatible with the peaceful coexistence that formed the foundation of galactic society. The ship's strategic database contained terabytes of information that painted a picture of human military thinking so alien that the coalition team struggled to comprehend it. As Vale worked through the tactical analyses, she discovered that humans didn't just prepare for war, They had turned the study of conflict into a science as precise as physics or chemistry. Every engagement the Iron Will had participated in was documented with obsessive detail. Weapon effectiveness ratios, enemy response patterns, psychological profiles of opposing commanders, even the efficiency of different types of battle damage and degrading enemy morale. The humans treated each battle as a laboratory experiment, designed to improve their understanding of warfare. They have mathematical formulas for calculating the propaganda value of different types of casualties. Vale reported with growing unease. A single human dying while destroying an enemy ship is worth more in their strategic calculations than 10 humans surviving a successful retreat. Hayes discovered that human engineering doctrine was based on an assumption that horrified him. Their ships weren't just designed to fight while damaged, they were designed to become more dangerous as they took damage. Systems that failed gracefully, weapons that could be jury-rigged from any available materials, and defensive systems that actually improved when conventional defenses were destroyed. "Look at this damage control protocol," Hayes said, displaying a schematic on his portable screen. When their primary power systems fail, the backup generators actually provide more power to weapons than the original systems did. They deliberately built in failure modes that make their ships more lethal. The crew quarters revealed another disturbing aspect of human military culture. Personal effects showed evidence of a warrior society where death in battle was not just accepted but celebrated. Family photographs were accompanied by letters encouraging loved ones to continue fighting if the writer died. Children's drawings depicted parents as heroic figures dying gloriously in combat. Nova accessed the ship's medical database and found protocols that challenged every principle of medical ethics recognized by the Coalition. Human military doctors were trained to prioritize keeping soldiers functional over keeping them healthy. Pain management focused on maintaining combat effectiveness rather than reducing suffering. They have surgical procedures designed to keep wounded crew members fighting, Nova reported. Amputation protocols that can be performed in minutes to prevent blood loss while maintaining the patient's ability to operate weapons. Medical stimulants that can keep a dying person conscious and functional for hours. Raven discovered the most chilling evidence in the ship's communication logs. The Iron Will had been part of a network of human vessels that shared tactical data in real time during battles. When one ship was destroyed, its final sensor readings were automatically transmitted to other vessels, allowing them to adapt their tactics based on how their comrades had died. They used their own deaths as weapons, Raven realized. Each ship that gets destroyed provides data that makes the surviving vessels more effective. They're literally learning from their own casualties in real time. The strategic planning database revealed that humans thought about warfare on timescales that dwarfed other species' attention spans, where coalition conflicts typically lasted months or years. Human military doctrine planned for wars that might continue for centuries. They had detailed analyses of how to maintain military effectiveness across multiple generations. Vale found evidence of something called total war economics that showed humans could reorganize their entire civilization for military production within months. They had contingency plans for converting civilian industries to weapons manufacturing, protocols for rationing resources to support extended conflicts, and social systems designed to maintain morale during decades of warfare. Their economic planning assumes that all civilian production might need to be diverted to military purposes, Vale reported. They've calculated how to maintain a war economy for over 50 years while still keeping their population fed and housed. The ship's cultural database contained historical records that explained why humans approached warfare so differently. Their planet had been shaped by constant conflicts between different groups, wars that had sometimes lasted for generations and ended only when one side was completely destroyed or absorbed. Hayes discovered that human technology development was primarily driven by military needs. Even their civilian innovations were evaluated for potential military applications. Medical advances were tested on battlefield casualties. Transportation improvements were designed to move military supplies, and communication systems were built to function during combat conditions. Everything in their civilization serves their military capabilities, Hayes observed. They don't have separate civilian and military technologies. Every innovation is designed to make them better at warfare. The tactical analysis systems revealed that humans studied their enemies with the same obsessive attention they devoted to their own capabilities. The Iron Will's computers contained detailed psychological profiles of dozens of alien species, complete with analyses of their decision-making patterns, cultural taboos, and likely responses to different types of military pressure. Nova found evidence that humans had been studying coalition military doctrine since first contact, identifying weaknesses and developing countermeasures for every known tactic. They had war game scenarios against every major coalition species and developed specific strategies for defeating each one. They know how to fight us better than we know how to fight ourselves, Nova reported. They've identified psychological pressure points in our military thinking that we didn't even know existed. They know exactly how to make us break. The command systems database revealed the ultimate expression of human military philosophy. Their ships were equipped with something called final victory protocols that could be activated when defeat seemed inevitable. These weren't just self-destruct systems, they were complex strategic programs, designed to ensure that even a ship's destruction would serve larger military objectives. Raven accessed these protocols and found detailed instructions for how crew members should die to maximize strategic value. Different destruction methods were rated for their psychological impact on enemies, their intelligence value, and their effectiveness at denying resources to opposing forces. They've weaponized their own deaths, she whispered. Not just individual sacrifice, but coordinated destruction designed to achieve specific strategic objectives. They can turn an entire fleet's annihilation into a tactical victory. The ship's educational database showed that human children were taught military history and tactical thinking as basic subjects, alongside mathematics and language. Their literature celebrated warriors and strategists, their art depicted glorious battles, and their music included songs designed to inspire soldiers facing death. Vale discovered that human society was organized around the assumption that warfare was the natural state of existence. Their governments were designed to make military decisions quickly, their economies were structured to support extended conflicts, and their social systems were built to maintain morale during prolonged struggles. They're not just a military species, Vale realized. They're a civilization that has evolved warfare into an art form. They don't fight wars, they are war. As the research team compiled their findings, they began to understand that humanity represented something unprecedented in galactic history. Every other species treated warfare as an unfortunate necessity, a breakdown of diplomacy to be resolved as quickly as possible. Humans had turned conflict itself into their defining characteristic. The implications were terrifying. The coalition had encountered a species that was not just capable of violence, but had made violence into their primary tool for understanding and interacting with the universe. They had found humans, and humanity had already begun studying them in return. The final sweep of the Iron Will's data core revealed something that changed everything the coalition team thought they understood about their investigation. As Hayes performed one last scan of the ship's power systems, his instruments detected something that made his skin crawl with sudden fear. The ship wasn't dead. It had never been dead. "The reactor isn't offline," Hayes announced, his voice tight with controlled panic. "It's in standby mode. The whole ship is running on minimal power, but it's been active this entire time. We've been walking through a functioning vessel." Vale immediately accessed the ship's sensor logs and discovered the horrifying truth. Every scan they had performed, every piece of equipment they had used, every conversation they had conducted aboard the vessel had been monitored and recorded by the ship's automated systems. The Iron Will had been studying them as thoroughly as they had been studying it. "The ship's computers have been analyzing our technology," Vale reported. "It's cataloged our scanner frequencies, our communication protocols, our equipment specifications. It knows more about Coalition technology now than most of our own engineers do. Raven discovered that the ship's communication systems had been active throughout their investigation, sending compressed data bursts to other locations in space. The Iron Will had been reporting everything it learned to other human vessels, turning their research mission into an intelligence bonanza for human military command. "We've been broadcasting Coalition secrets for the past 18 hours, Raven said, her voice filled with horror. Every piece of equipment we brought aboard, every tactical discussion we had, every weakness we inadvertently revealed has been transmitted to human intelligence services. Nova found evidence that the ship's medical scanners had been analyzing their biological signatures, learning about Coalition species physiology, psychology, and potential vulnerabilities. The humans now possess detailed information about how to kill, disable, or psychologically manipulate every member of the research team's species. They know our pressure points, our pain thresholds, our biological weak spots," Nova reported. "The medical bay has been conducting stealth autopsies on all of us. They have enough data to design weapons specifically tailored to each of our species. The ship's tactical computers had been running constant simulations based on the data they collected, testing different scenarios for fighting Coalition forces. The humans had used the research team's presence to verify their strategic assumptions and refine their battle plans. Hayes discovered that the ship's damage wasn't from battle at all, it was deliberately staged. The Iron Will was a perfectly functional vessel that had been disguised to look like a derelict. The battle damage was real but controlled, designed to lure curious Coalition forces into exactly the kind of investigation they had just completed. This whole thing was a trap, Hayes realized. Not to capture us, but to learn from us. They wanted us to study their ship so they could study us in return. Every primitive system we examined was actually bait designed to make us reveal our own capabilities. The ship's psychological warfare database revealed that humans had predicted Coalition responses with disturbing accuracy. They had known that scientific curiosity would overcome caution, that Coalition researchers would be unable to resist the opportunity to study human military technology. The humans had used the Coalition's own intellectual arrogance against them. Vale accessed the ship's strategic planning systems and found detailed analyses of Coalition military doctrine, complete with recommendations for exploiting weaknesses the research team hadn't even known existed. The humans had identified critical flaws in Coalition ship design, tactical thinking, and command structures. "They know how to defeat us," Vale announced. "Not just our individual ships, but our entire military philosophy. They found ways to turn our strengths into weaknesses and our tactics into liabilities." As the team prepared for emergency evacuation, the ship's internal communication system activated for the first time since their arrival. A calm human voice began speaking throughout the vessel, delivering a message that had obviously been prepared for this moment. "To our Coalition visitors," the recorded voice began, "thank you for the intelligence gathering opportunity. Your investigation has provided us with invaluable data about your capabilities, your decision-making processes, and your technological limitations. This information has been transmitted to our fleet command and will be used to develop more effective strategies for future engagements." The message continued with clinical precision, describing exactly what the humans had learned and how they intended to use that knowledge. Every piece of Coalition technology had been analyzed and countered. Every tactical doctrine had been studied and defeated. Every cultural assumption had been identified and weaponized. "We suggest you reconsider any hostile intentions toward human colonies or shipping lanes," the voice concluded. "We now possess sufficient intelligence to predict and counter any military action your species might take against us. We know how to fight you, and we know how to win." Raven discovered that the message was being broadcast not just to the research team, but to Coalition command centers throughout known space. The humans were ensuring that their warning reached every species that might consider them a threat. The evacuation became a desperate race as the team realized the full scope of what they had stumbled into. This wasn't just one ship or one intelligence operation, it was part of a systematic human effort to study and catalog every potential enemy in the galaxy, Nova found evidence that similar traps had been set for other species, each one carefully tailored to exploit specific cultural weaknesses and scientific interests. The humans had been conducting a galaxy-wide intelligence gathering operation disguised as accidental encounters and diplomatic mishaps. "There are dozens of these ships," Nova reported as they reached their shuttle. "The humans have been studying every major civilization in the Coalition. They know all of us better than we know ourselves." As their research vessel fled the system, the team compiled a report that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. The humans weren't just another species with advanced weapons. They were a civilization that had turned intelligence, gathering, and strategic analysis into their primary tools of warfare. The Coalition's military strategists would soon learn that humanity had spent the months since first contact not establishing trade relationships or cultural exchanges, but conducting the most comprehensive military intelligence operation in galactic history. Every diplomatic meeting, every scientific collaboration, every cultural exchange had been an opportunity for humans to study their potential enemies. The galaxy's response was swift and decisive. Emergency sessions were called in the Galactic Council, military forces were placed on high alert, and diplomatic channels were opened for immediate negotiations with human leadership. The message was clear: humanity was not to be provoked under any circumstances. The iron will had served its purpose perfectly. In allowing themselves to be studied, the Coalition had inadvertently revealed that they were no match for a species that treated warfare as both an art and a science. The humans had won a strategic victory without firing a single shot, simply by being better at gathering and using intelligence than their potential enemies. The final report carried a recommendation that sent shockwaves through Coalition space. Immediate diplomatic engagement with human leadership is essential. Under no circumstances should any Coalition member species take hostile action against human interests. They have demonstrated an understanding of warfare that makes them effectively undefeatable using conventional military doctrine. Our only option is to ensure they never have reason to view us as enemies. The galaxy had learned the hard way that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their ability to understand their enemies better than those enemies understood themselves.